Richard, Jason, welcome to the show. We're happy to have you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thanks.
So Richard, you are an industry specialist for banking, and Jason, you are a principal data strategist. What does that mean exactly, and how do you guys work together at AWS?
Yeah, so in my role, I work with our customers and partner organizations to focus on business needs, understanding those, and then working backwards into the technology that we provide and the specialists like Jason that we work with to deliver those business-focused outcomes.
Yeah, and I sit in an area in Amazon Web Services that helps customers understand the power of data. And very similar to Richard's role, we work backwards around the business problems, and then by articulating that through thought leadership as well as immersive workshops, we then uncover how the technology then becomes an enabler to that solving of the business problem, as opposed to thinking about technology first.
So we're looking at the problem from three layers here: the problems that are specific, or the challenges that are specific to banking, and then in those, what challenges we have with data and how we can solve those with technology at that third layer, right? So recently, I came across a blog post that your team shared, which was very interesting, talking about the changes in customer experience as in terms of customer preferences, differences in digital user engagement, expectations for embedded finance within the workflow of customers applying for finance, for example, all of these different trends that are shaping the industry, basically. And on the other hand, in the technology world, technologists are talking about cloud being able to enable banks to respond to these challenges. How do these two worlds fit together? Can you help us bridge that gap?
Yeah, sure. So, look, I think it's really clear that the financial services industry, not just in banks, insurance companies, asset managers, have been focused on customers and the experience they have engaging with them for some time now. But what's really interesting is that we've, I think, as a sector, we've seen the digital transformation of other industries. Media and entertainment would be a good example, or travel or retail. And what that's had is an impact on customers' expectations of how they engage with banks and insurance companies, whether it be online or actually in branches and more traditional means. The bar has been raised, if you like, as a consequence of that. And that's happened because these organizations have digitally transformed. And that's a pretty big deal, which means more than just technology. But importantly, cloud technology really is a key enabler to allow those organizations to offer the kinds of services, the kinds of product and innovation that customers are beginning to expect more and more of. So think about cloud really, as I say, as that enabler. It classically in financial services allows organizations to build greater capacity to innovate, to do things differently. When I'm saying innovation, I don't just mean around product, but how product is consumed and served to customers. It also allows organizations to become more agile. So they're able to change more easily to meet changing needs in customer expectations, for example, or requirements, or regulatory or economic circumstances. And then the third area that really cloud provides capability for and enables is being data-driven. It makes it much easier for organizations to get their hands on data, because we all know financial institutions have data everywhere, and to organize it, govern, control, manage it, and then place it into parts of the organization where that data and the analysis and the information insight that comes from that is most useful.
Okay, so what you're saying here is that cloud can enable agility, innovation, and unlocking insights from data for banks. Now, the question is, what for? I mean, why do they need these three things? What are the changes that have happened in the industry where this becomes a necessity?
Yeah, so when I talk about those three things, really what I'm talking about is this idea of digital transformation, which is a change really from how organizations operated and ran before. And really it is the new model, if you will, for financial institutions, big and small, in each of the different sort of subsectors in which they operate in. And they're delivering a different kind of quality and product of service. Now, customer experience, customer delight, obsession is, as I said at the very beginning, hasn't gone away from the sector. It's just changed in its nature. And the industry has for a long time tried to solve for some of the challenges that customers have when they engage with them, whether they call into a branch or pick up the phone and talk to a contact center, for example. What we're really seeing now is this digital technology, cloud technology, changing the way organizations solve for these problems and giving them a better chance of fixing them, because many of them have existed in the industry for a long time now. And I'm reminded of, I think, the Einstein quote, and I'll probably do a very bad job of quoting it, but nonetheless, the industry has been trying for a long time to fix these challenges. And was it the definition of insanity is trying to do the same thing time and again and expecting a different outcome?
Yeah.
I think the important thing for executives in financial services, as with other industries, is that cloud is something different in how it is used, how it is consumed, and how people can operate with it within organizations, which gives businesses a better chance of a different kind of outcome when it comes to not just customer user experiences, but a whole bunch of other challenges within the industry. So that's really the sort of qualitative and quantitative difference that cloud represents compared to more traditional monolithic on-premise type infrastructure, which for many financial institutions is 20, 30 years old. But in the heart of that, what really is almost like the oil in the engine is data. And being able to trust data and then execute on data strategy that really becomes an important differentiator and a capability that we see cloud enabling within our customers.
So we see cloud here as basically necessary, but not sufficient for unlocking full insights from data or becoming completely digitally transformed. So Jason, beyond the technology, where do you see the challenges for banks to actually get on that data-driven journey from the strategy perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, we're not just talking about banks, but financial institutions that include insurance as well. But fundamentally, the challenges with these organizations is that historically they have been beholden around some of the key business drivers, which is either on the underwriting side in terms of loans and risk, or it's on the compliance side with the regulator. Now, the investment in terms of technology, particularly around data, has always been around how do we provide the right amount of information to be able to underwrite loans or to be able to provide the right amount of data to the regulator, such as the PSD2 or Payment Services Directive initiative in the last few years that required financial services institutions to report. And obviously, the investment was we needed to get the data to provide to the regulator. But these large-scale projects for these organizations take a lot of time.
Yeah.
The challenge is that we need to now then link that data to how do we differentiate customer experience. And it's actually one and the same.
Yeah.
But changing that monolithic culture of doing things in a very waterfall mentality to actually doing things in an agile manner is very hard, particularly in organizations that have always been working in this type of long-scale approach.
Yeah.
The other side that we're seeing as a massive challenge is there's a lack of alignment in terms of how different business units in an organization consider success to be. If you were to ask the risk area what their success measures are, it's about the ability to underwrite the loan, the conversion to a loan product. For an insurance provider in the underwriting space is how do we upsell a policy? But if you were to ask the marketing team, it would be slightly different. It would be about what they call the cost to acquire. But there's been a lack of understanding the success measures of these two business units and what the common data product is that allows both of those ambitions to actually be upholden.
Okay. So if I were to play back what you're saying, some of the challenges on the data strategy side is that, number one, they're doing the work to get as much data as they need for a specific use case or requirement, but not necessarily looking at it from an organizational perspective. It's more on the use case level. And the different departments involved have different metrics. They don't understand each other's metrics. They're not accountable for each other's metrics. And even though the data set might already be there, they're looking at totally different things and they're not working together. So it's hard to actually reach the outcome that we're looking for.
Yeah, I'd say 100%. I mean, we talk a lot within Amazon Web Services about multidisciplinary teams.
Yeah.
Within financial services, innately, business units are siloed because they're supposed to have their own governed way of doing things. Particularly if you work in compliance, your requirements is to make sure that you are not fined.
Yeah.
So in that case, the data professionals within compliance will be working in their own siloed units. So there's always been this inability for these business units to share the data.
Yeah.
Now, that goes counterculture with what we're seeing now in the industry, particularly with startups and fintechs, where they're a lot more agile. And I think this disruptor effect, where you have these new upstarts, actually becoming more agile, providing more differentiated user experiences that we're trying to see these larger enterprise organizations trying to adapt to. But asking these data professionals to overnight change the way in which they work is very hard.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine. It makes sense that there's a large investment, let's say, in the compliance or risk management side, because there's a lot of customer data that they're stewards of, and there's a lot of potential ramifications to their reputation or to their bottom line by being fined by the regulator, or they're liable to more risk, let's say, legal or otherwise. But the data around the customer preference changes is clear. The signals have been there for a while, and to your point, the fintechs have taken advantage of that. Richard, what do you think is blocking some of these institutions from actually adapting to the customer services side, even if they are still siloed from compliance, for example? Why are they not moving as fast as they could?
Yeah. So coming back to my 3 points around innovation, around agility, and around being data driven. I think many incumbent or established scale financial institutions can see just as clearly as other organizations what their customers want and what they need to do. Oftentimes they lack the capability to do so quickly and innovatively, and that's because the technology stacks they're operating on, as we mentioned previously, typically are quite complex. They're not. They're very strong. They deliver on the requirements of the business, but they're not very flexible and adaptable. Certainly not without taking additional risk. If you make a change over here, what are the unintended or unknown consequences of happening over there? So that makes that process quite slow and quite difficult. As you begin to use more agile, modern technologies that are available in the cloud, so you begin to be able to reduce the level of independence, the level of dependence, if you like, between different parts of a system, so that you can focus on some of the specific business use cases. And that really is my point. When you've got a technology that allows you to focus on a particular challenge, particular issue, and gives you the capacity to change that for a much lower level of risk, because you're more agile and more adaptive in the way that you use technology, in the way that technology and business work together to solve the problem, rather than it be a handoff to a technology function. Then you begin to be able to be much more data-driven in what you do, for two reasons. One, because this new technology creates data for you about how your customers are engaging with you in your organization, so that you can understand them, better, collect information about them, and make decisions based upon that data, rather than an assumption or a hypothesis about what you might want to do. But beneath all of that, or within all of that, is the approach really that comes from the agility, in that you really don't need, once you've identified some business use cases, you really don't need to build a whole architecture and infrastructure that solves for all of them. And I think in the past, that's pretty much what organizations in this sector and others have done. Let us build a data architecture that allows us to solve all of the data problems that we have today. The challenge with that is that it is expensive and it is risky, and kind of gets delivered, if you like, in one shot. So the implementation risks associated with that are quite high. And that's really why you see costs overruns, and you see these things being delivered later than they originally intended to do. Oftentimes so much later that the business needs have changed. They then have to be adapted again. So if you think a little lot smaller, and I look at the organizations we partner with that are making the most progress in their digital transformation journey, they are taking individual business use cases and solving backwards from them with the data. What data do we need to solve this problem, to innovate, to deliver a better experience for our customer, or to reduce costs? Find where that data exists within an organization. It might be in a number of different places, and then create data product in order to deliver against that. That's a concept perhaps we'll come back and talk a little bit more about. But by doing that, use case by use case by use case, you do a number of things. One, it's lower risk, and it's easier to deliver, because you're doing it once for one use case rather than for everybody. You can be specifically right rather than generally correct and specifically wrong for a bigger number of cases. But because you're using this modern technology built on micro services, you can have confidence in moving forward that solution then can adapt and change, and can sit alongside and integrate with the next business use case you're solving, and the next business use case you're solving. And in that way, you kind of build up, if you like, your architecture, your enterprise-wide solution to delivering data strategy in a much more organic way that allows the teams to learn along the way as well. So rather than trying to do everything once and first time, you're breaking things up and allowing teams to learn how to do things better over time. And it then becomes a continual process that adapts and changes to the organization's need, your customer's need, rather than something that you plan for, deliver, and then forget about.
So what you're talking about here is perhaps a shift in a way from having a top-down waterfall approach to more of a bottom-up agile approach, where we test something, we spin it up, we see if it works, we see if it gives us the results, and then we continue. Or we scrap it and then we move on. And we do one use case and then the next and then the next. And we use that to evangelize with other departments, get executive sponsorship that we need to get access to that data. And then we can, let's say, spread that out across the organization.
You're building capability and trust within your organization to do more.
So the reason, or one main reason that wasn't happening, is that the technology debt was so heavy that, or the technical debt was so heavy that it would be too hard to pivot in that direction. When they have more agile tools, then they can enable that kind of agile approach. On that point, Jason, another trend that we saw in the article that you released was enabling digital channels, having an omni-channel engagement with customers, especially an investment in digital channels where 90% of consumers want to or have engaged digitally with their bank, not via phone, for example, or via post. And there are multiple interfaces that they have with their bank now. Where do you see this new agile approach fit when meeting customers where they are, or how they want to interact with financial service institutions?
So digital optimization, or what we call omni-channel, is not new within financial services. The approach that has been taken, particularly with product and marketing teams within financial services in the last 10 years, has always been about this concept of buying the platform, which can be hosted on the cloud, and actually testing and learning the experiences. Now, the thing is that what we're seeing right now, particularly around customer preferences, is less about the experience, which is generally a linear journey. Let's take an example of, if you're trying to apply for a loan product and you're using your mobile phone, you expect it to be easy. You put in your details and then it'll come out with the amount that you can borrow. Now, that is a very linear journey. But what we're finding is that consumers are asking more for differentiated, personalized experiences. It's actually about understanding the customer's journey through the lifetime of utilizing all the different products and services with a financial services organization. So what we're finding actually is that to be able to be truly customer-centric and actually having the right omni-channel journey is actually providing the right experience in the right moment of the customer's experiences with financial services. So a good example is that if I were, not married and I was still in my mid-20s, then I'd be looking for a car loan product. But as I develop and I have kids, then I would be looking for life insurance.
Right.
Financial services organizations, they're siloed because different product areas will operate their own different data silos. But the fundamental thing is, if you were to join those different data silos together to understand the customer's journey throughout utilizing all those organizational products, you would understand this is the right time to market that life insurance product to me. But unfortunately, that's not quite the case. And they're investing only on the platform to provide the experience in that linear journey. Now, with the fintechs, they understand that. Fintechs are a lot more agile with understanding that it's not about data silos, but actually creating that customer data product from the very get-go. But with it, again, enterprise organizations can't quite grasp how to join that together. But what we're seeing is there's new ways in which we can enable that. And that's where cloud technologies and the capabilities allow us to federate those data products. How do we get those different business units to talk to each other without doing too much lifting and shifting? How do we join those different synthetic data products together to create something that is not only a master source of truth, but is reusable for all the different use cases that those different business units have? One big thing that we also need to recognize is that operational expense has been growing and growing in financial services. But it needs to stop. And that's where you're seeing in the market conditions right now, there's been a lot of layoffs within financial services. And they're seeing that as an opportunity for them to actually think about, how do we change the way in which our organization operates? And the one thing is we need to stop the way in which we use data products in a duplicative manner. And the way to do that is to see if there is duplicative effort. Why don't we then compact and join that together so then we can create those multidisciplinary teams?
Sure.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I agree entirely with what Jason is saying there. Coming back to our point previously, though, cloud technology gives you these new tools to begin to do that more easily. The solution is only solved in the context of a data strategy if processes, if governance and control structures change with that. And again, the technology makes that easier to do. The technology can adapt to those kind of business challenges, those kind of operational requirements in ways that traditional technology wasn't able to do. So you no longer have to rely upon manual processes or the guy with the spreadsheet to make sure that you've got the right governance and control around a particular data product and how it is used in an organization, how it is trusted and verified. You can actually build that into some of the technology solutions, automate it, free up people's time so they can spend looking at the quality of the data and the analysis and insight they can derive from it using modern tools like machine learning and artificial intelligence, rather than just the physical process of moving the data from its original source to somewhere else in the organization where it may or may not get used.
And I think that's actually a really good point, Richard, that we also find within financial services organizations has been a lot more acute. These organizations usually keep the domain experience of the data for years upon years. People have worked at these organizations for 20, 30 years. For them to see cloud technologies, particularly AI and machine learning services, potentially replacing them is very scary. And we need to accept that you can't just change technology and hope that people adopt to that. There needs to be a way in which organizations understand how to incentivize those people who have the domain knowledge to still be there, to be able to drive value. And this is not about replacing what they're doing, but it's about what we call inverting the triangle. If we're able to save them the time from doing all the manual tasks, what can we do to replace that time with something that is really value added? And I think that's important is because we're not saying that in order to do the value-added tasks, you need to do a lot of skills training, do a lot of coding as a data professional. With cloud technologies, the ability to build out things such as predictive modeling could be as easy as clicking a button nowadays, rather than needing to do that training. And I think the messaging needs to be very particular for financial services organizations to be able to provide that incentivization. And unfortunately, we're not seeing that at the moment.
So you talked about fintech disrupting larger or more established financial services industries. But let's be practical here, right? If I'm an enterprise bank, let's say, and I've been in the market for the last 40 years, I'm not going to become a fintech. I have too many branches. I have too many employees. My organization is complex. I have different requirements. I provide different services than the fintech who is just starting out. There are a couple of people. They don't have any legacy technology at all. So if I'm leading enterprise strategy from a data perspective for a well-established bank, how can I actually go where my customers want me to go and deliver a superior service like the fintechs do, but with my own unique challenges and culture and complexity?
So I talked at length previously about focusing on business use cases and value, working backwards from those, building up a portfolio and some capability around that. That's really important. But I think data strategists, CDOs in organizations also have to have a perspective of the bigger picture. What is the data architecture that I want to move to over the medium term that is going to be fit for purpose for my organization's needs? Not just today, not just in the medium term, but longer term. And when I mean longer term, is it flexible and adaptable enough to allow me to continue to navigate in the direction I want to, deliver data product consistently to data consumers in a high trust and high quality way?
What is a data product, and how will it help with this kind of situation?
Yeah, we alluded to it a little bit earlier. A data product is really where we're treating data as an asset, an organizational asset, but particularly in the way in which we develop products. A really good analogy is that a product right now within financial services would be an application that is facing to the customer. Now, in product design, you would want to be able to test out experiences, do it in a very agile approach over 2 or 3 weeks, test and learn the feedback, understand the feedback, and then iterate against that feature.
Mm-hmm.
What we're asking about is to treat data as a product,
Okay.
but also treat data as a way in which you can iterate that, learn from it, and then federate that to more users.
Okay.
So that way, you're not only able to have a single source of the data, but you're able to have more data consumers seeing the value of the data, but provide the feedback of what use cases they're using the data for. So then the data producers will be incentivized to give more data to enhance the data product. So that way, if a data product starts with a marketing function, but then they give that to the operations function to use, and the operations function says, that's improving my success rates in terms of my CSAT scores, then the marketing team would be incentivized to send more data. But then suddenly the risk team will go, well, why don't I send more data into this data product as well?
Yeah.
So then you're automatically creating, a very collaborative environment in these traditionally siloed organizations to be able to work better. And I think that's the concept of data reservoir.
But how do you stop the duplication from happening? I mean, theoretically, each of these departments can create their own data product if they even adopt that kind of mindset. So how do you make it so that it's cross-functional, so that it is one single source of truth, at least for that part of that data assets lifecycle?
So that's a really complex problem that organizations face. And coming back to the previous point around data architecture, that begins to provide the kind of framework that allows an organization to create those kind of solutions. Unfortunately, even with the fantastic technology we've got, it's not a silver bullet for these things because it requires people and processes to change. Critically, it requires culture to change really as well. To become data-driven and data-orientated, to think about data as a product in the organization will require a lot of financial institutions to actually think quite differently about what they do and how they do it. But this data architecture has to sort of match, it has to fit, if you like, the organizational structure and culture of the organization that it's meeting, that it's serving rather. And we could have a separate conversation about this subject only, but our audience will perhaps be familiar with terms like data lakes or lake houses or even data meshes. What these really represent are alternative solutions to solving for enterprise-wide data-driven orientation or the delivery of data strategy at the end of the day. And the differences between those those models, those architecture approaches, really comes down to the organizational structure of your business, how centralized or decentralized you are in your decision making, so that you begin to your data strategy begins to reflect your organizational model, rather than be something that is jammed into it. Conway's law is the sort of the relevant point here. But if you've got a multi-jurisdictional organization with many different products, many different channels, and many different customer types, you will want a more decentralized, adaptive, flexible model than if you are, relatively speaking, a simpler, less complex organization, which has a very clear organizational goal, which everybody within it can orientate around and deliver product against at the end of the day. But as I say, a bigger topic perhaps we can come back to, but having a clear idea of what your architecture looks like that is fit for purpose for your organization is a really key step in executing against data strategy.
So I want to bring everything you guys have said together to kind of, let's say, make it actionable a bit for our listeners. So you mentioned that starting from individual use cases and building those up in an agile way is the path really for organizations to get started and become data driven. And you were mentioning also that the beginning of the data journey for a lot of financial services institutions comes from necessity, actually, because of compliance and regulatory risk. So I'm thinking, is there a way for banks and other financial services institutions to hit two birds with one stone by choosing a use case that is necessary for their business? So for example, we talked about having a data product that requires a paradigm shift in how they're managing data and shaping a cross-functional team. Would something like embedded finance be a good candidate to force, let's say, that kind of collaboration in a constructive way, or hyper-personalized offers, right, which require collaboration across multiple teams and look at the customer journey as a whole? Use cases that force breaking the barriers across those data silos. Do you think that would be a good way to start?
Yeah, I'll fill that one. So I think, we within data strategy, we have a view in terms of what is a use case that is meaningful, but also feasible. And I think we have to accept the fact that there is going to be competing priorities across business units. But I think we need to have a focusing function first to be able to align everyone's priorities. And then with the technologists and the business voices in the room, when you go through that forcing function, understand where the common use cases are that are powered by data. That's number one.
Okay.
But we also then need to understand what are the success measures that each business unit can attribute to that. So that way you've got a one-to-many. So to your earlier question on how to reduce duplicative effort, it's understanding that by doing the one data product, you've got many success stories that you have. Through that focusing function, it's then understanding the different layers of how you can then build out something in a meaningful and a very quick way, which you may have to have a capability of disagreeing, committing with other business units, where you say, we will only deploy this data product to serve the needs of one area first, but the foundational capabilities of this data product can then have the success of other business units, but you'll need to wait. And it's that forcing function and that ability where you're almost telling people that, we understand that you got skepticism over this, but we're doing it in a very quick way. If we fail, you'll see that we fail and we learn from our mistakes, and then we can iterate against that. I think that would be a very meaningful use case. But like you said, some use cases sometimes will be compliance related. And that's not to say that use case is right or wrong, but we just need to have the voice in the room that can say that is the right use case, but showing that you can do it in a minimal way. So that way you can actually prove out the value quickly.
Yeah, I agree with all those things. The only other thing I'd say is that data functions or data teams typically are headed by chief data officers. They really are enablers and facilitators of digital transformation at the end of the day. Rather than functions which restrict and limit what data can do within an organization. They're often being driven by absolutely the right things to do. I want to make sure that this data is correct, that you have access to this data legitimately. All those things are important, and I'm not suggesting that they are compromised in any way. But the modern data strategy and data teams need to be solving problems for the business and other parts of the organization proactively, because the technology allows them to do that in a much better and much more flexible and adaptable way than they've done before. That's really for me the sort of the key success, having data and data functions as enablers of digital transformation rather than guardians of data strategy.
So from everything we've talked about today, it seems like there's a couple of key themes here. Number one is to modernize the technology to lower risk, increase agility and speed, and increase the pace of innovation. That's number one. Number two would be to select high-value use cases and set up the right success metrics for them so that we can experiment quickly and move in the right direction. That's aligned to our business goals, the changes that we talked about earlier around customer preferences. And the third thing is to look at where different KPIs converge so that they can, let's say, the lowest common denominator KPIs, so that they can start to build a data product and get the feel for the organizational changes required for having that cross-functional collaboration where several people are working on a single data product that can serve the wider organization as a whole. So if I'm, again, day one, and I've just taken the reins of data strategy for a enterprise financial services institution, how do I get started? Where do I go? What would you guys recommend?
So I mean, within the data strategy function, we work very closely with our industry specialists around having an open discussion with our chief data officers and leadership within financial services organizations through thought leaderships, as well as fireside chats like the one that we're having today, just to understand the key pain points in terms of the mindset of the organization, the people and the process considerations, as well as the technology. But like I said, technology is the multiplier, but it's really understanding the mindset, the people, and the process. Once we understand that problem statement, we in data strategy host those immersive workshops where we can do that forcing function on behalf of chief data officer and bring those elements of the room together to be able to understand those use cases. But the idea is that we help to understand that first flywheel turn, that minimum lovable product. But then the organization can then take the reins of that data product and really then strengthen and scale that ambition. I think it's really critical. We're not talking about reducing duplication, but we're talking about leaving a data legacy behind that removes the need for the organization to re-platform in the future. And that's where we need to have is we need to reduce this dependency where different silos are doing their own cottage industry. Because that might still serve the needs of the business and strengthen the KPIs, but you're still creating these cottage industries where if someone leaves, you have that single person dependency that goes with them. So we need the technology to leave that legacy behind. So in 5 years, 10 years time, the next person who comes into that leadership role won't have as hard a time, which I imagine a lot of chief data officers are having right now.
Sure.
Yeah. All of those things. Start small, iterate quickly, build capability, learn, be prepared to experiment and adapt, and then focus on the scale at the end of the day. Because organizations want to do this on an enterprise-wide basis. You need to get that. You need to be cognizant at the start of where you need to get to it at the end. Not try and solve for everything right at the very beginning, but know where you're going and find ways to scale quickly and efficiently.
Richard, Jason, this has been great. Where can our listeners go to learn more?
Yeah, so within AWS Data Strategy, we have a webpage, and you'll see the link, embedded on this video here. Sure. We have a series of workshops which we call Data-Driven Everything that you can also find some more information on. We've also got assets such as the blog post, which is coming out in the next week or two that you'll see in the link below, that provides a little bit more information in terms of the changing in trends that we're seeing in financial services and where we're seeing some of the technology moving towards to be able to invert the value triangle, what we talked about, which is the ability for the people who are skilled in data to really drive the value of the business rather than feeling as though that they're doing the more medial manual work. Richard?
Yeah. Speak to your account teams. Talk to them about the challenges you faced. Get them to get specialists like Jason and myself in the room, talking, sharing the experience that we've had with other organizations and practically rolling our sleeves up and trying to solve those initial use cases. Tremendous action is really where we're at. When you can demonstrate value, then more people want to get involved. They want to share in the success, and it's that you mentioned a flywheel. It's that what you want to create, so that it becomes self-sustaining at the end of the day, and it's not a multi-year hard slog effort to get to where you want to go.
Great. This has been awesome, guys. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insights with our viewers. It was really great to have you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.